From my perspective, the problem with Tito, because Tito was the first dude that they were like really trying to push as like the big loudmouth, and he was great, but Tito was still a wrestler and was ground and pounding dudes. And I think we were still being educated as fans at the time. It wasn't as exciting to watch Tito ground and pound people as it was when Chuck Liddell just got in there and was sort of just knocking motherfuckers out. It was crazy. Chuck Liddell made me fall in love with the sport. That was like the dude, you know?
Yeah, no, Chuck was, he was the man. He was partly responsible for putting this sport on the map. He really was. He was one of the guys that really built it.
And not enough credit given to Chuck Liddell for kind of being the godfather of the current style of sprawl and brawl, and kind of like the dudes who have wrestling bases now that don't really wrestle dudes down and wrestle fuck them and get on top of them and try to ground and pound them. The guys who are wrestlers, the Demetrius Johnsons of the world who wrestle to keep, to kind of put themselves in the dominant position. That's kind of like Chuck Liddell was the first dude that was like really wrestling to keep it standing. You know, if he did get taken down, just getting back up to his feet. The style that you incorporate, your whole style, I feel like Chuck Liddell was the guy who kind of made that style.
I disagree. Just because somebody wants to throw punches and not get taken down, that's not really a style. That's just fighting the way you want to fight. You know what I'm saying? I want to go out there. I want to kickbox. My background is that of a kickboxer with a bit of boxing now. And I don't want to get taken down because therefore I can't fucking kickbox. That doesn't mean that I owe my entire style to Chuck Liddell. I was doing kickboxing before I even knew who Chuck Liddell was or before I'd seen that stupid fucking haircut. Now, I'm not disrespecting Chuck Liddell.
Except for calling his haircut stupid.
He's an icon of the sport, and he helped build it today, the sport to where it is today, and all credit is due to Chuck Liddell. I met Chuck a few times over the years, and he's a good guy. We have a good relationship. But people like me and people like Chuck Liddell, when they meet at, let's say, 3 in the morning after lots of alcohol has been consumed, it never goes well because we're both alpha males. You know what I mean? Like, for example, I remember I fought at UFC. I can't remember which one it was. I fought in London, and I went out to an after party. And we came back, and me and my wife walked into the hotel. It's 3 in the morning. I'm just trying to get another quick drink before bed, celebrating.
Yeah, why not?
Night, Yeah, and there's Chuck, and Chuck's with all his crew at the time. And I can't remember what happened, and neither can he. But it got a little, a little edgy, shall we say.
Right.
And anyway, a while later, I was in Vegas, and Chuck Liddell came up to me. He goes, "Hey, what's up, Mike?" I say, "Hey, what's up, buddy? How you doing?" He's like, "Did we nearly fight in London?" I'm like, "I don't know. I can't really remember." He said, "Yeah." He said, "Me neither." He said, "But apparently everybody said that we nearly got into a fight and this and that." And I vaguely remember there was a bit of shit talking going on, but we were both very, very drunk and just having a good time, I guess. But yeah, Chuck Liddell is a legend. And
you know what I just
realized?
What
are we talking about here? We're talking about him, maybe.
Well, no, I just realized that you are the common denominator in that situation. This same thing happened with Eddie Bravo. Same things. It says, I don't know.
Whoa, hold on. Are you saying that you've never had an argument with somebody?
Not with a professional MMA fighter.
Yeah, but all right, with a comedian then.
Yeah, I have. No, but I'm an asshole.
Well,
I'm an asshole. I'm the problem.
That's what I said. I'm an asshole. Well, I'm an alpha male, and an alpha male with an alpha male. It's like my dog Tito when he was around. God rest his soul.
He's listening. He's listening up in heaven right now.
He's fine with all other dogs that are smaller than him.
Yeah.
But when he sees this dog that's a similar size that keeps pissing on his garden hedge, right? He's like, motherfucker, there he is. I've wanted this dog for a while, and they fight. And it's the same thing with humans, with alpha males, especially ones that fight in the UFCs. And when it's 3, 4 in the morning, and there's been copious amounts of alcohol involved. So yeah, but no, Chuck's the man. But so we're talking about him possibly coming back.
Possibly.
Ortiz in Bellator, right?
47 years old. I guess he met with Scott Coker, which is crazy to me. It's crazy to me that, I'm sure Dana White is furious because apparently Dana White and Chuck Liddell are like real deal friends, like old school friends. But in the climate today, how do you bring back Chuck Liddell? I don't really know. How do you justify it in the UFC without it being looked at as a freak show? Look, if you're going to have CM Punk, I think there's more justification for bringing back Chuck Liddell. At least he's a former champion. I really don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do it, but...
So here's the thing. Now, I don't know this for a fact. This is third-hand information, Okay, but that's my disclaimer because I'm in the circle, where people tell me things. So I'm this. This is me putting out a disclaimer. If they hear me saying this, I can say, well, I said it was third-hand information.
Right.
When really it might not be third-hand information.
You know what we should do, Mike? We should get a sound effect where it's just some sort of some glass breaking or something, or like a chain breaking sound effect for you breaking the circle of trust. Yeah, well, no, it was you breaking the circle of trust.
Yeah. Oh shit. Yeah, I'm not breaking any circle of trust, but somebody at the weekend told me that Chuck Liddell is really pissed off because he had a sweet deal with the UFC when he left. He had this job. He was an ambassador for the UFC, and rightly so. UFC were taking care of him. And I believe he was on $1 million a year. Whoa. That's the number that I heard, which is, come on, fucking hell. I mean, that's a great job for what? Attending UFC events, $1 million a year is fantastic. And it was great that the UFC were doing that. And there was a few other people as well that were on these, fantastic ambassador deals. And it was awesome that the UFC was doing that. Now, of course, new owners came in. And you can't blame it from the new owners' perspective either. They... I guess don't have the same loyalty towards fighters that help build the brand. I'm not saying they don't have loyalty, but I'm saying I could understand them saying, well, hold on, why are we paying all this money out to these guys when they've just bought it as a business? You know what I'm saying? They don't have the emotional involvement. Again, I'm not saying they don't have emotional involvement. I'm saying, playing devil's advocate, you could see the reason why they would lay them off. And I heard that Chuck was really pissed off. So that's why he's possibly going over to Bellator.
Pretty crazy. Do you think that he can come back and compete? I mean, how long has it been since Chuck Liddell fought? Shannon, look that up. I mean, it's been...
It's true. Oh, I don't know. But here's the thing. Can he compete? Should he come back? The answer is no. Can he compete? And should he fight against Tito Ortiz? The answer is probably yes. Because they fought a couple of times. Chuck won both times. They used to train with each other, and apparently back in the day, Chuck, would always get the better of him. And, we've seen, of course, in the UFC, Chuck got knocked out. I think it was 5 or 4 out of his last 5, or even 5 out of his last 6. I think it was 4 out of his last 5 fights. Chuck got knocked out. So, listen, he did the right thing. It was time to walk away. He'd made a lot of money. UFC offered him a sweet gig. And he was losing fights, like I said. So he did the right thing. That doesn't mean that he couldn't possibly compete against Tito Ortiz, because Tito did lose a lot of fights, went over to Bellator and somewhat reinvented himself. He won some fights, he did well. But Chuck will always have that mental edge over him, where he won 2 fights and apparently used to handle him in training. So I don't know. Does it mean Chuck Liddell wins? No, it doesn't. Does it make it more interesting? Yes. 100% it does.
Yeah, it's a fight that I never call for a third matchup when somebody has already won 2. And we watched, actually, Tito actually does that. That's didn't Tito do that more than once? I know he did that with
Shamrock.
Yeah, with Shamrock, he had 3 fights with him and he won all 3. He might have had a third fight with somebody else. That's happened a few times, which is very strange.
Chuck. I think he had Randy Couture a couple of times.
Yeah, very strange.
Forrest Griffin.
Was it 3 with Forrest?
3 fights with Forrest, if I'm not mistaken, yeah.
Maybe it wasn't. Yeah, that's right. It was maybe 1.
Yeah, he had 3 fights with Forrest. So, yeah, you're right. He's had a lot of rematches there. That's interesting. But that's good. That shows it's actually really smart.
Well, he's built as like
in those storylines.
He's like a villain. So, people want to hate him. So he goes against all these dudes. He's a perfect villain. He just talks shit. He's a real dick.
No, he is. He was like the first guy that was doing that. He was the first heel of MMA, if you will.
But now I'm interested in seeing it because the truth is, Tito's fought. If taking that long off, it's the same reason why, an easy pick over George St. Pierre is you. Or to be honest, I really see Tyron Woodley giving George St. Pierre problems for the same exact reason. By the way, I said before that no other UFC champion had a podcast. You and Tyron Woodley both have podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. There
Tyron's
you go.
got one as well.
Tyron, go fuck yourself.
Copying our model. Anyway, so
here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. Are you going to tune in and watch Tito Ortiz taking on Chuck Liddell?
Yes.
Listen, you bet your ass you will. 1,000,000%, because anybody that watches MMA, doesn't matter if you're a new fan, you know who Tito Ortiz and Chuck Liddell are. That's a lofty statement, but they are true icons and legends of the sport. And if they were to fight a third time, whether it was on YouTube, Bellator, UFC, wherever it is, you're going to go out of your way to watch that fight simply because the history involved is too much. The storyline, they're both icons, they're both legends. And, you know, it's Tito versus Chuck. They helped build the UFC back in the day.
I'd watch Chuck Liddell come back and fight anybody. It doesn't matter. It's Chuck. It's fucking Chuck. It's going to be weird, though, if he comes back and fights for Bellator. I don't know. Do you see the UFC in today's climate coming out and offering Chuck Liddell a fight in order to not fight for Bellator? Do you think that his relationship with Dana and company is valuable enough for them to say, I'm not going to let Chuck? Because I remember Dana White years ago saying something like that he would never let Chuck Liddell fight anywhere else, that if he ever came back, he would fight for the UFC, though he would convince him not to. He would make it an adamant point not to.
Yeah, well, of course, listen, I mean, I'm speaking on behalf of the UFC here, and I shouldn't be doing that because it's not my place to, but one would assume they wouldn't want Chuck fighting for Bellator. You know, I mean, Chuck's one of their guys. Chuck is, you know, he has UFC blood running through his veins. But I'm hearing he was a little annoyed at losing his job, and maybe he needs the money now. I mean, I don't know what his financial situation is. I have no idea. That's just pure speculation. The thing that makes it interesting, though, is that Vitor recently did speak about this Legends division. Now, nobody wants to see a Legends division. We've talked about this on here. Nobody wants to see that. It makes it stupid. It undermines the UFC. The UFC is about having the best fighters in the world. But if Chuck is hell-bent on coming back and fighting for Bellator, the UFC might be able to say, listen, well, hold on. How about you don't fight Tito Ortiz? How about you fight Vitor Belfort? Yeah. And still they offer him some decent money. So there is a possibility of that happening because that would be a similar type of fight. Obviously not the same history, but still, you know, both guys from that same era, both guys that helped build the sport back in the day. So maybe they could convince him to stay that way, maybe.
Did you see Tito's tweet at Chuck?
Did he show that old video of Chuck falling asleep during the TV interview?
I don't know if he did that. I just saw the one. Tito, or I guess Chuck, tweeted a video or a picture of him fighting Tito and said, "Why not?" And then Tito responded with, "Because I don't need the money. Sucks that you need the money. I can lend you some cash if so." And then
yeah, no, I saw that, and then I think Tito then posted a video of that interview. Did you ever see that interview? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Where
Chuck was
asleep
on like Good Morning Britain or Good Morning TV in Texas or something.
It's terrible.
And whilst being interviewed, obviously had a very heavy night the night before, and possibly was still under the effects of whoever knows what kind of substance, maybe alcohol, maybe who knows. I'm treading very carefully here. He fell asleep live on breakfast TV. It was awesome. Did you see that?
I remember, and this is at a time when the UFC was, you know, they had to fight.
They were trying to break out and be legitimized, and people take us serious as athletes and all this type of stuff. And then Chuck falls asleep live on TV in the morning interview. It was awesome. It was great, and I think that's why we all love Chuck Liddell. You know, I don't know if this is true, but when I fought on UFC 66 back in the day, that was when Chuck Liddell fought Tito Ortiz for the second time. They were the main event. My fight against Eric Schaefer was the opening fight on the pay-per-view. And the guy, these guys were out following me around from England, a company called Red Earth Productions. They were making a documentary about me called Britain's Ultimate Fighter. And they told me, and apparently Chuck was, you know, well known for this, but they told me one day, they said, the night before the fight, they were getting the elevator back to their room, and Chuck walked in with a couple of girls and a couple of guys, and like it was like 4 a.m, and you know he clearly had a few, and they were like, "You okay there, Chuck?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Big fight tomorrow, right?" He's like, "Yeah." You know, and he said he couldn't believe what he was seeing. So yeah, God bless Chuck Liddell.
Love Chuck Liddell. Good luck for him. And I look, I don't want to see it because, you know, at the end of the day, it's a 47-year-old man. But I do want to see it because I'm a Chuck Liddell fan. I don't know.
Well, the thing is, though, he does slur his speech a little bit these days.
Yeah.
Now, of course, you know, maybe I slur my speech a bit, but I've always done that. And maybe Chuck was never the best speaker either, but I think he does slur a little bit. Now, I don't know what that is. Maybe that's from, you know, having a life in combat sports. Who knows? Maybe I'll be doing the same in a few years. So that is another factor to consider.
Yeah, it is. It's something so weird. Like, you know, we don't really know because it's such a young sport. One of the things that everyone's always kind of touted has been like, oh, you're not punching the head as much as, you know, boxers. You're not being concussed and there's no standing 8 count. You're not allowed to get back up. But, you know, look, at the end of the day, you are in the gym a ton. You are being punched in the head a lot. Like, it's not even just the fight. Like, we only see the stats in the gym, in the fight. But I mean, look, how often do you hear about guys getting knocked out in training or concussed in training or being, you know, repeatedly because you're just doing boxing sparring one day, right? You're doing that a few days a week. Yeah. So the trade-off, it is what it is. I think, you know, you've spoken about this. I think the trade-off is you say, fuck it, dude, this is what I know, this is what I love, and the risk is, or the reward is worth the risk to you. But yeah, it's you know, Chuck is one of those guys where you go like, who knows? I don't know. You know, it's sad because as a fan, you go like, I want to see it, but once you start to get to know some fighters, you go like, well, I don't know, man. Is it worth it for me to watch this guy get into a fucking cage and possibly die? Yeah. You know, 47-year-old man, who knows?
Well, the last thing on this before we move on is it's as simple as this. Nobody wants to see fighters sticking around longer than what they should. You know, it's sad. It is a sad thing to see. But at the same time, do I want to watch Chuck Liddell take on Tito Ortiz for a third time? Probably. So